Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another round of Bases Picks. As always, please like and subscribe and share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. We out on location yet again, but content needs to be made. Apologies for the lack of casual stream and other stuff. I was gonna do a video on the Francisco Rodriguez thing, but we'll talk about that later on down the week. We'll address that. Anyway, this is all about the Ring free card taking place in New York on the 12th, or for the UK lot, our slot, it will be the 13th. There's, from what I can tell, I think there's 6 bouts on the main broadcast. We're going to be talking about the last 4 on there, and yeah, I'm going to try and keep this video a bit shorter than the previous one. We'll see where we get to, but yeah, without further ado, let's get into the picks. So first fight we've got to talk about is David Morel Jr. versus Imam Kattikov. So first fight we've got to talk about is David Morel Jr. versus Imam Kattikov. Now, this is a classic boxer puncher versus pressure fighter type scenario. In the scenario, you usually have the boxer puncher who has a stylistic advantage because they are equal parts defense and offense, being able to draw the lead, usually being able to punch within the onslaughts and the barriers of the pressure fighter. That being said, there are some caveats here. You've got David Morel, who is, while he is a big guy, he probably still could make 168 if he wanted to and make it fairly comfortably. Okay, maybe not comfortably, but well enough. Whereas Imam Kattikov is a bona fide 175 pounder, very big, strong, stocky, burly guy. Looks like he can take and hold a shot. Now, Morel's had 2 fights up at light heavyweight. He hasn't scored a stoppage in either of those 2 fights. One fight he won on decision, the other fight he lost on decision. He's shown that he's got good enough defense that he can sort of ride a barrage of punches. He seems to not have too much issues on the chin. Kattikov is definitely a guy that's going to look to try to bang to the body and bang to the head if he can be motivated to do so. His last fight, he definitely went through the motions, didn't look interested, didn't look like he had the impetus to get his opponent out of there. Whereas this one, I feel like he's going to be a bit more motivated. Number one, because Russia and Cuba have I would say they've got a bit of a rivalry in the amateurs, so he's going to be looking to obviously get another Cuban scalp on his resume. Outside of that, this is a guy that if he beats him, he's now in that contendership status and able to try and win world titles, or at least be put into like final eliminators for that. So there's a lot on the line for him to be able to do so. On the other hand, you got David Morel Jr. coming off of the defeat to David Benavidez, where he did better work than Benavidez. He just didn't do enough of it. Benavidez outworked him, used his experience, basically just out-hustled him and landed more shots. At the end of the fight, you saw both of them. They both had some marking, but David Morel was decidedly a lot fresher looking than David Benavidez at the end of the fight, and he's coming back before David, so there was no necessarily beating that he took, so he should still be very fresh. I think that movement is going to be key here. I think David is going to look to use the ring, not necessarily enough that he's going to want to evade, but I feel like he's going to try to walk Kattikov into shots from the outside, or sort of try to barrel in the pocket with him on the inside. I feel like he's gonna selectively stay in the pocket, because Kattikov, if he gets those hooks going, he's a very thudding puncher. He will, like, if he lands, those punches are going to register, and you don't want to be taking too many of them unanswered. So I do think movement is going to be the key, and I feel like when it gets to the middle to late rounds, as I do think the fight is going to go late, I do see Morel basically using the extra stamina and energy that he has, opposed to Kattikov, who's now maybe the battery's starting to drain a little bit, and ends up getting walked onto extra shots for cumulative damage. I can see a scenario where Kattikov gets dropped, and I can see a scenario where he ultimately doesn't see a 10 count. So I am actually going with Dave Morel to win this fight. I'm going with him to win the fight via stoppage, whether that's ref waving it off or hitting the canvas and not making a 10 count. And I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere between round 7 and round 10. Right, so next we got Alberto Puyo taking on Sulria Matias. Now this is for the WBC, I believe it's the WBC super lightweight title. Alberto Puyo, obviously of Dominican fare, and then Sulria Matias of Puerto Rican fare, so nice little rivalry there for the two. You've got Puyo, who is he's a very underrated boxer. I've underrated him in the past, but he's very good, a very good technical boxer, being able to box on the outside, box and move, create angles, 1-2, step out, reset, go again. Now, Sulria Matias is very much a pressure fighter. He is a classic pressure fighter. However, he is a pressure fighter that basically he comes forward in a very methodical and contained manner, but none of it is necessarily like quick, not until he gets maybe rounds 3-4, when he just starts to sort of let his hands go. Now, he's not classically fluid in the way he throws his shots. Sometimes he throws shots that look very unsightly, gangly, just awkward and ugly to look at, but every shot he throws, accumulatively, they just hurt. They're just big thudding shots. They wear you down, they break you down, and he's got an engine that just, it doesn't take long to get going and it doesn't fade. If he can get into range, he will let those shots go from round 1 all the way through to round 12 with very little fuss. So the impetus has to be on Alberto Puyo to stop him from being able to get into range, to box him from the outside, constantly keep him turning, keep him moving, very similar to the way that he got dealt with by Liam Paro. Now, will there be a bit of machismo in this, where Alberto Puyo decides he wants to try and, you know, for the Dominican legacy, fight a little bit with Sulria? Possibly. He might allow himself to get drawn into a fight, but if he does, that is definitely a recipe for disaster, as that is what Sulria wants, and I guarantee that he wins that exchange. In this fight, I think that Puyo is going to move a lot. However, I think the difference between this fight and the fight he had with Gary Antoine Russell is that Russell is more of a boxer, puncher, who tries to also create his own opportunities, set traps, throw counters. So he had the opportunities to be able to hit, not get hit, reset and move. I feel like Sulria Matias is going to be looking to step forward a lot more and constantly making Alberto Puyo have to fight. In those first 3, 4, 5 rounds even, that can be a tactic that, you know, works. He's gonna fight, he's gonna be, you know, banking the majority of those rounds, but he's gonna be getting touched from time to time. Again, the accumulation is where I think this gets interesting. Now, if he manages to get through sort of the first 7 rounds without accruing much damage, then on that second half of the fight, where he's now in a bit more survival mode, I feel like he can coast the rounds and probably nick 1 or 2 to be able to get a points decision. But if he gets caught with anything from, say, round 3 to 4 onwards, I feel like the challenge for him to try to survive the rest of it is where the problem's gonna lie. And so far, no one has managed to survive with Sulria in any fight that he's won. He's lost 2 fights, but every fight he's won has been via knockout, stoppage or corner retirement. And I don't think this one's going to be any different. I think Alberto Puyo is going to be up on his toes from the start. I feel like he's going to be working that jab. He's going to be, you know, sort of walking Sulria onto shots, but I just don't think they're going to have a desired effect from early enough. But I feel like he's going to be doing so much extra work that the energy reserves are going to start to run down, probably from about round 4 onwards, while also having to take, you know, take some shots back. And I think because of that, ultimately, when rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8 start to come into play, I feel that Sulria is going to find his range, find those shots, pin Puyo towards the ropes, and just start getting to work, just chopping him down round by round, round by round. I think that Sulria Matias gets a stoppage. I do think that he will get the stoppage here, and I think it will be between sort of rounds 8 to 11, which is normally a lot later than he would, but I do think that just due to Alberto Puyo being very patriotic, being, you know, not willing to go out without a fight, I do think he will last a little longer than the majority of the people that Sulria takes out, but I do think he will eventually get stopped. So I'm going between rounds 8 to 11, stoppage win for Sulria Matias. Right, well, we are at the big one. This is Shakur Stevenson against Cameron William Zepeda. Now, both southpaws, one classic pressure fighter, the other is definitely a pure boxer. I would give them the toggling between the pure boxer and the boxer puncher tag, although Shakur doesn't really punch hard due to the hands at this point in time, unless he's really digging down to the body. William Zepeda seemed a bit like a wrecking machine. He obviously fought Maxi Hughes, and sort of took care of him in like 4 rounds. Giovanni Cabrera, similar in 3, like Masito Hesto, these sort of just these fringe names. But when he came up against Tevin Farmer, he basically found that his work rate and everything that he's doing doesn't quite hold the same rate. Now, Tevin Farmer isn't a carbon copy of Shakur Stevenson, but there are certain things that they do well. Tevin is a lot more comfortable staying in the pocket, slipping, riding and rolling shots, whereas Shakur would prefer to be outside of the pocket, not having to necessarily trade, but he also is fairly proficient in the pocket, especially while throwing body shots. I think that Shakur ultimately is a level, possibly 2 levels above William Zepeda, who is very crude. He does throw a lot of shots, but he is very crude. Shakur has had pressure fighters before. He's had fighters with high volumes, and he's managed to find ways to drop their output. Part of that is due to angles, due to using his lead hand to sort of stop their progress, due to spinning off at times, you know, also not necessarily tying up, but just being on their blind side where they have to readjust before they can throw their shots. It will be interesting how it looks against another southpaw, as he doesn't obviously fight a lot of southpaws, but I think his skill set is actually just too vast. I feel like he's got enough tools in that tool bag to be able to pull out an answer for anything that Zepeda gives. Zepeda's going to have his most advantageous rounds probably between rounds 2 to 4. Or the first round to be a bit of a feeling out round, I reckon, but from there onwards he's going to have some success, but I think Shakur will make the adjustments. I do think that Shakur is actually feeling like he's got a point to prove, maybe even risking damaging the hands further. I feel like he's actually going to decide to sit in the pocket a lot more in this fight than people would expect. I feel like he's going to also push Zepeda back. He's going to step to him. He's going to cut the output by basically punching in between it, shooting down to the body, tying up when necessary, and closing off his side of the body when he feels like Zepeda's going to want to take certain shots. Ultimately, all of that, I think that Shakur will make a statement here. I actually think that given what he's done with several of his opponents, especially after he's had either bad fights or fights that he's been heavily criticized for, the next fight or the fight after that, he usually goes to work and, as he says, puts belt to ass. And there's enough openings that William Zepeda will give him where he will be able to land clean, effective shots. As long as the hands hold up and the hands are good, and he's willing to commit to putting a little bit of extra mustard, sitting down on a few of these shots, I see him stopping Zepeda. Tevin Farmer, who's not known as a big puncher, was able to drop him off a counter. I think that Shakur can do not only that, but sustain it as well. I'm gonna be bold. I'm going with Shakur to win via stoppage. I feel like he's gonna drop Zepeda to the body on 1 or 2 occasions, and I think at some point Zepeda's either not going to be able to get up or he's going to get dropped multiple times and the referee waves it off. So that's my prediction. I'm going for Shakur to win via stoppage with that big chip on his shoulder, as he's got a point to prove. Last but not least, we've got Hamza Sheeraz and Edgar Balanga. Now look, this is the main event of the card, or I guess the second half of the main event, you should say, up at 168 pounds. You've got Edgar Berlanga, who is the more natural 168, very stocky squat type individual, not the greatest of defense, footwork, punch combination movement, but he does have legit power. Whether he can land it on like upper level guys is another story all in itself, but he does have the power, especially if you stand right in front of him. Where this does give some benefit to Hamza Sheeraz, though, he was obviously killing himself to make 160 in his last sets of fights, the same as he did when he was at 154. He's about 6'3", and Belanga's 6'1". Sheeraz has got the much longer reach here, but coming up to 168, I feel like he's going to be the fresher guy. You've had Edgar Berlanga talking about, potentially like going to light heavyweight, going cruiser, eventually going and fighting up at heavyweight. Him talking about those future plans now, however much in the future they may be, tell us that he's aware that his time at 168 is limited in terms of how much longer he can make it. Whether that's because he doesn't live the life outside of the gym, which, all of the bling and the parties and the people he associates with would maybe suggest that he's definitely a guy that just gets fit for camp and then sort of has a nice time after that. You can maybe tell it's getting harder for him to make the weight. So in that instance, even though he's the naturally bigger, stockier guy in terms of just body mass and size to Hamza Sheeraz, if he's struggling to make the weight or is having to make the weight harder, then that means that he is going to be fresher for less time in the ring than where Hamza will be. Hamza will be a bit more comfortable, probably have a bit more energy, feel a bit more energized, especially in the first half of the fight, whereas Edgar Berlanga may be a lot more labored and sort of having to conserve energy, or maybe having to measure his output because he just doesn't have the same level of reserves. Ultimately though, I don't think the fight really takes I don't think that's what really takes this fight to its conclusion. I think the fact that Edgar Berlanga isn't Carlos Adames, he's not like a short, squatter guy who's got very good upper body movement, can bob and weave in and out of shots. He's very much a guy that will hunch down, crouch into a position, come forward with a high guard, but he will stay fairly static. So you haven't got to worry about him slipping the jab. He might try to block, parry the jab and come back with like a left hook or an overhand right or something, but you ain't really got to worry about him necessarily like slipping it and leaving yourself exposed in that sense. Hamza Sheeraz has, at the moment, especially in Britain, and especially at those weight classes, one of the best jabs in the world. He uses his height and his length perfectly. He gets full maximum extension on those straights, especially the jab. The straight right is another one he gets maximum extension on, and he still has those freakishly long arms where if he tucks into his body from his elbow to the top of his hands, covers everything, and there are no openings for you to get through. The only caveat to that is the fact that Edgar Berlanga can be extremely dirty if he wants to. He can throw a shot and then allow the elbow to kind of trail the shot. He can get on the inside, rough up, maybe throw a borderline shot on the inside. So Hamza Sheeraz has got to be very careful of the quote unquote the dirty tactics, the meanness, the nastiness, because Berlanga's just going to be looking to hit whatever he can hit in the ring, whereas Shiraas is going to be trying to look for the precision. That I feel is where his biggest concerns are. But with his natural height, reach, and that ramrod jab, I feel like he's just going to be walking Edgar Berlanga onto jabs all night. Edgar's not going to just be barreling forward, walking forward, applying pressure constantly, because that jab is going to be hurting. It's going to be stinging. And unless he can get to that mid-range to inside level to throw one of his big hooks, which to be fair, he does load up on time, so it is quite easy to kind of tell that that shot's coming, Hamza should be able to either slip it, block it, or tie up before the shot comes in properly and frustrate Balanga. The more he frustrates Balanga, the more erratic Balanga will become in the fight, possibly resorting to street tactics. And we all know what we've seen him go to bite opponents before. We've seen him go to do it, like I said, a lot of dirty tactics. The last thing he's going to want to do, actually I say the last thing he's going to want to do is get himself disqualified, but he might prefer to get disqualified in his home city and maybe have Hamza out on the canvas afterwards doing something illegal or hurting Hamza that way, rather than actually getting KO'd in his city, as he calls it. He says he's the king of New York. You don't really want to get knocked out in the kingdom. So maybe Hamza Sheeraz's best tactics is actually to try and just frustrate him and make him revert to that nasty character and maybe get points deducted or maybe get himself disqualified. But what I do think will happen is that Hamza's going to control a lot of the space behind that jab, and Berlanga's just not going to have the adjustments, not going to be able to get past it. He's going to get peppered with the jab, he's going to get peppered with the backhand up top, he's going to go to the body as well. He's probably going to have some moments where he swings a big shot, maybe even gets through, and Hamza's, you know, we've got to question, does he have the chin? He might even get dropped. Can he get up from that? But ultimately, I just see Hamza controlling a lot more rounds behind that jab, because as I said, Edgar Berlanga isn't Carlos Adames. He doesn't have that type of movement, and those shots were getting through, they were hurting. So I think at the end of the night, my prediction is that Hamza Sheeraz is going to win this fight. I think Edgar's going to see the final bell. As hard as Hamza does hit, I do think that Edgar's got a fairly decent chin. And like I said, he's probably going to resort to some other tactics before allowing himself to get knocked out in New York. But that being said, I do think Hamza Sheeraz wins this fight. I think he wins the fight via a unanimous decision, possibly a split. But I do think that Hamza Sheeraz gets it on the scorecards. Leave me your predictions down below. Let me know who you think is going to win both of these fights, all four of the fights, but that one in particular. Thank you very much for watching. If you can hear anything in the background, don't worry about it. I'm obviously in a public place, but it's all good. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and I'll catch you on the next one. But for right now and for this weekend, that's Basis Picks. Locked.